Hello students, today we are going to learn lesson number 2, David Copperfield by Charles Dickens in English literature. I hope that you all are learning at your respective homes. So let's get started. First, let's talk about the author. Charles Dickens was a British novelist born in England. Over the course of his writing career, he wrote quite a number of classic novels such as Oliver Twist, A Christmas Carol, A Tale of Two Cities, and Great Expectations. His novels and short stories are still widely read today. One of his novels was David Copperfield. An extract has been taken from that novel and has become your chapter. It is a story of a young boy's growth and his development into maturity. So, it was the short description or introduction of the British author or the novelist. Now, let's talk about the chapter and the characters which are there. The story revolves around David and his experiences throughout his life. In this chapter, David Copperfield, as a grown man, tells the story of his youth. As a young boy, he used to live happily with his mother and their servant, Miss Peggotty. His father died before he was born. His mother was sad and upset due to this. When he was 8 years old, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Murdstone started to visit their home. David and Miss Peggotty did not like him at all, but David's mother liked him and soon got married to Mr. Murdstone. During the visit of Mr. Murdstone, Peggotty once took David to Yarmouth, where David met with Peggotty's brother and her nephew Ham and little Emily. David was very happy when he met them all, but when he came back to his house, he saw that his mother got married to Mr. Murdstone, and then he also got to know this, that Murdstone was a cruel and a violent man. Mr. Murdstone always neglects David and tries to punish him. He often beats David and complained about him to his mother. One day, David bites Mr. Murdstone and Mr. Murdstone decided to send him to a school in London, where his friend, the headmaster of the Salem house, Mr. Creakle, also misbehaved with him. Due to this, David did not like that school too. But whenever Mr. Peggotty and his son, Ham, he becomes happy. During his holidays, he used to go to his mother's house in Blunderstone, where he saw his mother with a baby in her arms. She was happy to see him. Soon his holidays were over and he had to move back to Salem House, the school in London, where his stepfather sent him earlier. He enjoyed his holidays with his mother and his young brother, but the time has come to go back. So when he was returning, he saw his mother standing there wishing him goodbye with a baby in her arms. It was a picture which remained in his mind forever, as it was also the last time that he saw his mother alive. Yes, students, this was the last time when David was looking at his mother, and it was his mother only that said the last goodbye to him. The time flew, and David has grown up now. His stepfather, Mr. Murdstone, decided to send him to Mr. Micawber and work with him in a wine shop where he had to wash the wine bottles and label them properly. He did not like his job at all, but he liked Mr. Micawber and his family a lot. Mr. Micawber had become his beloved companion too, but he was very poor and was heavily in debt because of his large family. He had to go behind the bars because of his debts, and due to this, David had to leave them because he had no one in London with whom he can live further. So he decided to go to Miss Betsy Trotwood, who was his only living relative. She was his father's aunt and she was fond of his father. David's mother told him about her when he was quite young. David decided to go there, but he had not enough money to reach there. So he walked to that place and reached there on the sixth day. He covered a long distance by walking only because he had no one with whom he can stay. She lived with her brother, Mr. Dick, who was quite abnormal. David told her everything and about her mother's tragic death. Miss Betsy was not permitting him into her house earlier, but when Mr. Dick told her to do so, she accepted him as her heart melted and when she heard his story. David was happy there. Miss Betsy and her brother loved David too, and she adopted him legally and sent him to a school in Canterbury. Yes, students, now we have learned that David had a tragic childhood, but when he came in the contact with his only living relative, he and his life had changed a lot. He had gone to a school where he had learned several things. So let's start further that what had happened in his changed life now. Aunt Betsy took David with herself to Canterbury, where she met with her lawyer, Mr. Wickfield. Mr. Wickfield told Miss Betsy that Mr. Strong runs a very good school. I will take care of David. You can leave him here and he can live with us and with my daughter, Agnes. Later, they both became good friends, or I should say, best of friends. Among Wingfield's servants was Uriah Heep, who was a snake-like young man who often involved himself in the matters that were not even required him. His life moves on. David has grown up and has graduated from that school and went to Yarmouth to visit Mrs. Peggotty, who got married to Mr. Burgess the carrier. David reflects on what profession he should pursue now. He has now graduated and wanted to make himself a good earner as well. When he went back to his Aunt Betsy, she suggested him to be a proctor, a kind of lawyer. She told him to practice under Mr. Spenlow and Mr. Jawkins. Mr. Spenlow invited David to his house where David saw his daughter Dora, and he quickly fell in love with her. One day, Miss Betsy came to David and told him that she had been ruined financially. She and Mr. Wickfield had ruined by Uriah Heep, one of the servants of Mr. Wickfield. David, who has become increasingly infatuated by Dora, vowed to work as hard as he could to make their life together possible, because he knew that if he doesn't have anything or any money, he would not be able to marry Dora. He tried a lot and tried to earn money, but when he went to Dora, Dora said that her father will not accept him as his son-in-law because he had none. Suddenly, one day, Mr. Spenlow, Dora's father, met with an accident and had died. Dora started living with her two aunts, and those aunts were polite with David. David decided to marry Dora now, and they both lived a happy life as David got a job as well. But David had another task to be done. He had to confront Uriah Heep and he had to make him expose in front of everyone. David wanted Uriah Heep to accept that he had taken all the money illegally, and he had done so as well. He made Uriah Heep confessed that he had taken the money, and then Uriah Heep returned all the money which he had taken from Miss Betsy and Mr. Wickfield. Dora died later in the story, and David remained alone and then came back to England after 3 years, where he grew his love for Agnes. Yes, they got married soon and several children they had. And then he pursued his writing career with increasing commercial success. So, it was the story of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Yes, students, so this was the story or the summary of the whole chapter. The novel basically tells you about David's life and his experiences, that how his life has changed, how many ups and downs he had seen and he had experienced. So, with this chapter, we had come to know that Charles Dickens was a very good novelist who had portrayed David's life in words and made us remember him forever. Thank you, students.